I saw him last week. He wrote in and said maybe I took it.
Do you have it?
Maybe, but it's probably my pictures. Yeah, the last time we performed together with that lady was here, remember, I couldn't find mine.
I can't find it.
It's in there somewhere because these are church programs, and this are more church programs.
Well,
It's in
what
there.
page am I? It's on a page am I?
Green sleeves, you gotta be looking for green sleeves. Or a child. What child is this?
I didn't see that.
We'll find it.
Green sleeves.
You want to put? All right. Let's put a mark on there. Yeah, that's good. See that? You put a mark on
Okay, got it.
So we don't have a big rush to get to the pews today anyway. Welcome to First Universalist of New Madison on this skiff of winter snow, chilly, actually looks like winter, day. The days haven't started to get longer yet, but they will be shortly, we hope. We've got a ton of material today, so I'll just kind of pare it down as we go along, but some of these things I just wanted to throw in. So let's start with the welcome. Sanctuary of the Soul by David R. Chapman. If you are lonely, here you will find warm companionship. Here in this sanctuary of hope, you can find a new seat at the table of life and feast yourself on love and fellowship. You will not hunger for the touch of a human hand or an embrace of your searching spirit. If you are afraid or have been abused, if you ache with fatigue, here you will find rest. You will be comforted, your spiritual wounds will be dressed, and your courage will be returned to you. You will be led beside the still waters, and your soul will be restored. If you seek to understand, here you will be encouraged in your search. Wonderful pathways will be lit unto you, and wherever your journeys take you, you will know that you can always come home again to this place made sacred by our love for you. This is a sanctuary of the soul. There are no boundaries in this cathedral of hope. The collective wisdom of all humankind and our painful but glorious history are open to you here. Your heart and your mind need never struggle with one another. This is a Unitarian Universalist congregation. We have no fear of science. We have no fear of knowledge here. If someday you decide to join us, you may feel what we have all felt in the words of author Dorothy Leigh Sayers. Quote, "All my life I have been wandering in the dark, but now I have found your hearts and am satisfied." And what do all the great words come to in the end but that? I love you. I am at rest with you. I have come home. This is from Sayers' novel, Busman's Holiday. Do we have any announcements?
Just a reminder, if you want to announce our plans for Christmas Eve
Yes.
and Christmas Day, and then also El Dorado is having a 4 o'clock Christmas Eve service, and we're invited to that if you'd like to go. So 4 o'clock on the 24th of December. Coming right up.
Coming right up, sooner than I had planned. I should have done more of a Christmas presentation today, but I wandered off and got sucked into an interesting thing that I'll share with you. El Dorado, Christmas Eve service at 4 o'clock. Everyone is welcome to attend. I'm going to do a little Christmas Eve service here. I'm going to do it after dark because I want to see the candles and the lights and turn the overhead lights in the church off so it looks like church used to look when you were a kid. Nobody is required or even obligated. I mean, you're welcome to come. I don't have a time yet because I'm going with Tara to New Carlisle. Theirs is usually 5 or 6 or 7 o'clock when I get back, and I'll announce when I find out what time, but it'll probably be around 10 o'clock at night, Christmas Eve. Then we're also going to have a Christmas Day service, or I am going to present a Christmas Day service. It will be short. No one is obligated to come to that, but you're more than welcome if you want to. If we don't have musicians, I'll have canned music here with Christmas carols. It'll just be a little celebration of Christmas morning. So, and then Derek will be here January 1st, because I don't think they're having church. They're pretty realistic. They're not having church on Christmas Day, and they're not having church on New Year's Day because everybody is occupied. So he will be off, and he was more than willing to come January 1st. So you're not obligated to come that Sunday either. You can watch on Facebook if you want to hear Derek. And then January 8th, Crystal would like to make a presentation. So Crystal Brooks will have a presentation January 8th. She wants to pick the music and all the readings. I think she wants to do the entire service, is my understanding. We'll figure more out about that as we go along, and I'll let you know what she wants to do. So that's a lot of stuff to shovel out here.
Just so you know, we're going to be going after our daughter, so we won't be here over the holidays much.
Okay. And we discussed, I'll come by the church once in a while and check. It's supposed to get cold next week. We've discussed whether we need to leave the boilers turned up or turn them down. It can get down into the 40s in here and still not freeze anything, so I'm not really worried about it. As long as the boiler's working and there's heat, I'm not too worried about what the temperature is going to be, but I'll come by every couple days on my way through town and check on it and see.
Ken,
Yes?
how long does it take, I'm just curious, how long does it take the church to warm up when you turn the heat way down?
It only takes a couple hours.
A couple hours?
Yeah. We talked about that too, instead of Chaz coming in on Saturday night, turning it up. You know, if somebody wanted to come in at like 5 in the morning, but son of a gun, nobody volunteered to do that. So I think we'll keep doing it on Saturday for the negligible amount of gas we're wasting by doing that.
We'll talk about that later.
Yeah. Well, we talked at one time about setting up a computer control thing, like on a timer that would turn it up, and we didn't really find anything that we could understand. And we haven't got Emerson into it yet, and we're kind of scared to do that because who knows what will happen if we get Emerson involved in it. So I think we'll just keep doing it the old-fashioned way, human eyes and human hands, keeping track of it. I don't really have a problem with that. All right, anything else? Let's have our prelude then. What child is this?
What child is this who meant to rest on Mary's lap is sleeping, who angels greet with anthems sweet, while shepherds watch our keeping. This is Christ, the King, who shepherds guard and angels sing. Haste, haste to bring him love, the babe, the Son of Mary. So bring him incense, gold and myrrh. Come, peasant king, to own him. The King of Kings, salvation brings. Let loving hearts enthrone him. Raise a song on high. The Virgin sings her lullaby. Joy, oh joy, for Christ is born, the babe, the Son of Mary.
even though we are a welcoming church, a welcoming congregation for any faith, any belief, or non-belief, if you just want community, we still have very deep and very beloved Christian roots, and we will stick with those Christian roots, and we will celebrate the birth of Christ. Our chalice lighting, A Community of Faith by Judith Quarles. At this hour, in small towns and big cities, in single rooms and ornate sanctuaries, many of our sibling Unitarian Universalist congregations are also lighting a flaming chalice. As we light our chalice today, let us remember that we are part of a great community of faith. May this dancing flame inspire us to fulfill our lives with the Unitarian Universalist ideals of love, justice, and truth. Our opening hymn is 231, Angels We Have Heard on High. See him in a manger laid, whom the angels praise above. Mary, Joseph, lend your aid while we raise our hearts in love. Gloria. We don't really have any good singers here today, so you can't really hear the lyrics to this song, but the lyrics are inspiring as well. All right, our affirmation. Blessed are the wanderers seeking affirmation. Blessed are the worshipers praying from the closets, pulpits, pews, and hardship. Blessed are the lovers of leaving family and familiarity, leaving tables where love is not being served. Blessed are those who stay. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for justice, for they will be satisfied. Blessed are the queer, disciples of truth, living, breathing, sacred reflections of divine love. What I got down the rabbit hole this week is, if you've watched the news and are petrified almost with every new thing that comes along, which is almost more atrocious and more scary and more discouraging than the next, you begin to try to make meaning out of this. And as you know, I've done this before and I will continue to do this. So today is just another step in that progress. There is a writer in England called Umar Haq. He must be Pakistani or something. I don't know what his origin is, but his name is unpronounceable to me. But he has a really facility, a gifted way of speaking and a gifted way of writing. And he has a little thing he publishes a couple times a week that's just very enlightening. So I'm gonna go through some of that today. I won't get through all of it, but it'll be a start. I'll try and put the spade work in, so you'll have some grounding as to where we go from next. That's where this came from. If you can read it, these are medieval conservatives. The lords worked hard to get where they are. This is the peasants digging in the potato field. The next peasant says they shouldn't have to pay taxes to the king. And the third one says, if they had more gold, then we would too. It's common sense. Things have not changed in 1,000 years. Let's do our children's story.
Now a story about the kindness of a stranger and the astounding way it changed a refugee's life. Here's Steve Hartman on the road.
I really like this one.
For Ida Jugai of Boston, Massachusetts. No matter what shows up under the tree this year, she says no present will ever compare to a gift she got back in 1999 on one of the scariest days of her life. Civil war was raging in Yugoslavia, bombs closing in on her family. So Ida's parents put their 11-year-old daughter and her sister on a plane to the U.S. by themselves. Ida vividly remembers the fear, but remembers just as well the comforting stranger seated next to her, an American.
I remember how kind she was to us, treating us like her family. So it was a bit of a shock, to be honest.
Especially when she handed you the envelope.
Yeah, I couldn't believe that somebody had so much empathy.
The outside of the envelope read in part, I hope your stay in America will be a safe and happy one. Signed, a friend from the plane, Tracy. And when Ida opened it, she found a $100 bill inside.
Ida and her sister moved in with a relative who didn't have too much more than they did. So that $100 bill fed the family for 3 months. And Ida says it continues to feed her soul to this very day.
That's why I actually kept Tracy's letter, because it's a reminder to me that people are good.
It has also been a main driver in her life. Ida owns 2 businesses that promote environmental and social justice.
The reason why I do what I do is because of Tracy. Every decision that I've made had to do with paying it forward.
I was wondering if you can help me find Tracy.
A few years ago, Ida put word out on social media, hoping to find the woman who gave her life direction. She spent years searching, until not long ago, when her message finally got through to Tracy Peck of Blaine, Minnesota. Tracy, Ida, and her sister Vanya reunited last weekend.
We just stood there and hugged and cried, and I just felt such a deep love for them.
I can't wait to come to your wedding.
Tracy Peck gave away $100 to total strangers, but she says the gift she has gotten in return is far more precious.
They've taught me the slightest thing that you can do for someone, you don't realize what impact that's going to have on their life. We have no idea.
But if you're lucky, maybe someday, you will. Steve Hartman, CBS News, on the road.
Now,
The slightest thing you do can have an impact in someone else's life. Never forget that. That is the Christmas spirit that can be lived all year long. Joys and concerns. We still have our sunflowers. They're kind of hidden by the poinsettias, which is nice to see some poinsettias. The one I brought from home is not faring very well. It's in with some greenery, some vines that are year-long, and I think they're strangling it, but it'll last the season. The Ukraine there's nothing improved there. The Russians, I think, sent 100 missiles yesterday or 2 days ago. As fast as the Ukrainians repair the electric grid, the Russians knock it out again. We all know what that means. We all know what that deserves. So we'll let that pass. Lou and Denise, has anybody heard anything how Denise's father is doing? Haven't heard anything there. Our hearts and minds are with Lou and Denise as her father struggles in northern Ohio. And Margaret and Patrick. Patrick was here last Sunday, the first time I've ever seen him here. And then 2 days later, he comes down with COVID. And then Margaret alerted us to that, and then 2 days after that, Margaret is positive for COVID. So she will be in, which is a really terrible thing, because you know Margaret is paranoid about that. She wears her mask all the time, and sanitizes her hands, and provides hand sanitizer for us. So far their symptoms are mild. I have a sympathy card or a get well card back there, if everybody could remember to sign that. We'll send that off to them, because I'm sure she will not be here for at least another week and maybe 2. And I did tell her when I replied to her email that no matter what Patrick did to us, he is still welcome here every Sunday. So we do not hold that against him. Any other joys and concerns? My wife is in Iowa. Let's see, how is that? Her sister's husband died of a lung problem. He had chronic emphysema, smoked for years, sent him to the hospital. He was on the ventilator for 2 or 3 days, and then they decided to do the end of life, so they turned the ventilator off, and he persisted. So they told him he had to go to hospice. So they pulled him out of bed, gave him portable oxygen, put him in a cart, took him out in the cold weather, put him in an ambulance, took him to hospice. He died 10 minutes after he got there. Sometimes you wonder about the medical system and the insurance program, if they couldn't have just let him be comfortable at the hospital for another day or 2, which is all it would have taken. So she is in Iowa, and the funeral is over, and they're on the way back. Travel mercies. Hopefully their weather does not interfere with their travel, and hopefully she'll be home tonight. And New Carlisle, as far as I know, they're still at 18 positive for COVID. So as you go out into the world for Christmas, I don't see people wearing masks. Yesterday I went to Reed Presbyterian Church in Richmond, which, if you know anything about it, the Reed family was a tremendously wealthy industrialist family in Richmond. There was a First Presbyterian Church, a monumental center city, rich church already built. The Reed family didn't like the way it was being run, so they built their own church. With it is a magnificent church. I'll bring pictures of it sometime. That congregation has dwindled and disappeared, so now the church is no longer a consecrated church. It is now a performance hall. They did a Christmas carol. The Shakespeare Company from Richmond did a Christmas carol, a live performance. Very enjoyable. They only had 8 actors, so they all did mutual parts. Each person played 3 or 4 parts, which is kind of funny seeing the guy that played Bob Cratchit with a beard and portly and jolly playing the part of a woman 2 or 3 different times with a dress and a hood on. It was pretty entertaining and very moving, as a Christmas carol can be. That was very enjoyable. But that is a picture of what happens as religion, formalized religion, kind of dies, and this magnificent, unbelievably expensive edifice erected by a rich family with stained glass windows, unbelievable wood, a pipe organ that's the size of our sanctuary, the pipe organ is. I'll bring you pictures. They are having the Reed Foundation, which has taken over the management of the building, is having a Christmas program Tuesday at 4 and Tuesday at 7. They'll be having a grand piano, a recital, and somebody will be playing the organ. So that I'm planning on attending that, and if anybody has the time or is interested, that would be, I think, a worthwhile thing to attend. No charge, just expose the building and the facilities to the community and let them know what is on offer.
Jennifer, where
Yes.
is that building?
Reed is on, if you go into Richmond on 40, headed west, you know, it's the dual lane, or actually 3 lanes going west. Do you know where the Richmond Historical Museum is? It's right downtown where 27 crosses. You can't miss it. It's on the right-hand side before you get to the kind of driver's side of town.
North A Street.
North A Street, yes.
Yeah.
Huge building, and if you miss it, the next building in the block is the First Presbyterian Church.
It's on 14th or 15th Street, isn't it?
Yeah. So I'm not sure of the address. I just go down 40 till I see it. It's the Historical Museum is a long block with a big steam tractor parked out in front. The church is the next block, is the next corner. If you turn down between them, there's parking, plenty of parking there. So, anything else? All right, for those thoughts, concerns, prayers, and even those bad thoughts you have about people, we want to help you get past those bad thoughts and find good thoughts for everyone this Christmas season. So, all right, our message. Let me go back to, this is what I was talking about, how things couldn't get any worse. Everybody recognize this? Donald Trump, immediately after the tech world has crashed and all the people with that fake money, whatever that's called, the Bitcoin, yeah, it's not, Bitcoin I think is still there, but whatever that kind of, that money that's non-fungible, or it's not real money.
Digital money?
It's just digital, yeah, it's digital money. Our ex-president comes out and presents these pictures of himself as the guy who avoided the draft, as a military pilot, as a sheriff, as a space person, and there's like, I don't know, 10 or 12 more if you've looked at it. $99 a piece, $99 a piece, and you don't even get to pick the one you want. You just go to the email place and send them your $99, and they send you, I guess, a digital picture. I'm not sure how this actually works. You don't get a real picture, you get a digital picture. And you also get entered in an opportunity to have dinner with the president or to speak to the ex-president on the phone. And all of this, people made fun of it. They said, what is going on with this guy? Things are getting loonier by the minute. This sold out, all these pictures sold out in one day at $99 a piece. I am not so worried and so upset and so concerned that this was offered. I am concerned that there is enough people with $99 who bought it. What are these people thinking? So that's the direction we're headed. I want to go back to, let's see, we'll go back to 2 weeks ago. We talked about High Noon, Gary Cooper. That was in the late 40s, early 50s. I think the film was released in the early 50s. You remember the story, the sheriff who tried to defend his town, thought the town would be behind him when the convicted killer that he put in prison was released, and vowed vengeance on Gary Cooper himself, not the town, just Gary Cooper himself as the marshal. He went through the town asking for help from his deputies, from the upright townspersons, from everybody, the sheriff who had retired before him. Everybody was afraid, everybody refused it. Everybody said, just leave town, run away, and let the outlaws take over the town, it won't last too long. Even his wife, who was a Quaker, said she would not support him, even though she did at the end, but she said in the beginning, as a Quaker, I'm opposed to violence of any kind. You need to leave on the noon train with me before the villains arrive. This, if you put it into greater context, this was in 1948, 49, 50, 51. Let's set the scene of what was going on there. Roosevelt had died in 45. Truman was now the president. The Democrats had had control of Congress since the 1930s, both houses. They put through innumerable social plans, Social Security, collective bargaining for unions, trade unions were encouraged. The FICA, the insurance policy for banks, so your money is insured, backed by the government. The REMCs, electric co-ops, were started. The credit unions were started. All of these things had union in their name. All of them were cooperative. What does all that remind you of, or what did it remind the people in the 40s of? The great danger across the ocean, the Red Menace, communism, socialism. Does this ring any bells? In 47, the country turned away from the Democrats and went to a completely Republican-controlled legislature. The Senate and the House were both controlled by Republicans. They started immediately investigations. HUAC, the House Un-American Activities Committee. HUAC, the committee, was the committee that investigated the person who wrote High Noon. They were the ones who threatened his job, blacklisted him, told him he could not work anymore, threatened to take his passport, threatened to evict him from the country. Immigrants were castigated. Immigrants were thrown out of the country. Thousands of people, evidently 4,000 to 5,000 people, were arrested by the federal government, and they tried to force them out of the country if they had any reason whatsoever. The country went on a right-wing tear, basically. Does this sound any way familiar? In January, the Republicans will take over the House and the Senate. Have they promised to increase security, to bring down the price of gas, to do anything else? No, what they promised is to start investigations. They want to investigate, they want to impeach the president. They want to investigate his son. They want to investigate the banking committee. They want to investigate everything. And if you hear the people who are the loudest and who are talking the loudest, they're talking space lasers starting fires in the West, Jewish space lasers starting fires in the West. These people are the same people from the same stock, from the same background that we saw in the 40s. What happened in the 40s and the early 50s is what I think we are going to see a reproduction of in the coming time. And things were unbelievably scary then. There were actually the federal government, J. Edgar Hoover. Do you remember all the activities that J. Edgar Hoover started? They used to go in and rough people up, physically manhandle them, to intimidate them and scare them out of the country. Thousands of people were arrested just for speaking out loud. 85 newspapers, and then this is the day before television or anything else, before even radio was real popular. Radio was just coming in. 85 newspapers and news outlets were closed down because the government didn't like what they printed. If they printed anything that talked about unions or socialism, they actually closed the paper down. There was a goon squad, a bunch of vigilantes, thousands of people enlisted in the vigilante groups, supported and run by the FBI, by Hoover, that would intimidate. If someone was trying to organize labor speakers, they would be intimidated. There was a strike in Colorado. 87 strikers, women and children and strikers, were killed by the security company that the coal mining company had hired. 85 people killed. And that was not unusual. In Tennessee and Kentucky, miners were killed when they tried to strike for better working conditions or improved money or improved payment. A pretty dangerous time that our history books are skimming over. And in the future, if you read the history or the information of what's coming out of Virginia, the history books will be even different in Virginia now that they have elected a Republican governor. There will be no more mention of Martin Luther King, no more mention of the speeches of John F. Kennedy. The only speeches that will be prominently listed are Ronald Reagan's "The City on a Hill." That is the information they want children in school to have. The children in school will not be informed about Kennedy, King, or any of the other more liberal speakers, or any of their speeches, or even Lincoln's speech will not be included. So, what you heard back in the 50s, what we are taking back our country, is exactly what we're hearing now. The unions were equated with being communist. The immigrants were equated with being communist. The gays were equated with being communist and something wrong with them, sick. All of this is happening again now. The antagonism towards socialism, which all of the programs from the New Deal, there are even people that are talking about trying to privatize Social Security. Can you imagine what would happen if your insurance at Social Security was run like your private insurance, where your coverage was denied and your rates changed and your doctors either on or off depending on how they follow the rules? So Hollywood creativity was, they were against that because of the high noon type movies. But the other reason they were against it, because who started Hollywood? Primarily Jewish entrepreneurs were the ones who were behind Hollywood, and the head of the great studios were all Jews. All right, this Umar Haq that I had talked about, he talks about the future unraveling, and he talks about the three pillars of our modernity or our modern life: abundance, prosperity, and democracy. They are all tied together. If you think about it, and that's what we will do, is investigate the connections between abundance, prosperity, and democracy. What they start with is the confusion that people feel every day, and if you watch the news, and I'm sure everyone has experienced this, that's where we get into, I couldn't believe when I saw this, I thought it was a joke. And it turned out that all these things were sold the first day, so it's not a joke. These people exist. The first idea this was mentioned on was a guy named Emil Durkheim in 1890. He talked about the Industrial Revolution and the effect it had on the peasants of the land. The peasants gave half of their harvest to their rich landlords, the nobles, whatever. They did not own the land. The noble or the landlord or squire, whatever he was, could throw them off the land at any time for any reason, no matter how trivial that reason was. This was not just England, Scotland, Wales, Ireland. This was France, Germany, Italy. The entire civilized world was run on this feudal system. So they paid taxes. They lived in the landlord owned the house. They could be evicted at any time. You've heard of common ground, particularly in English storytelling. The commons were the center area in every village that were owned in common, the first sign of any kind of socialism. Anyone could pasture their cow or their sheep. Anyone could walk on that land. Anyone could hunt on that land. The Lord's land was the Lord's. You could not hunt deer, pheasant, squirrel. You couldn't hunt anything there. This was an age when people did not have enough to eat, and they lived on what they could forage from the wild areas. And the lords would control thousands and thousands of acres, and they had patrols out to keep other people from hunting or gathering food there. They paid taxes, and they had no control over what the taxes were and weren't. This all started the change that began to happen with the Industrial Revolution. All of a sudden, and it was not pretty, people were left the land, but they had an opportunity to live and earn money, and their wages could be set by collective bargaining. Eventually, that happened. It took a long time for that to happen, but people got used to that. They got used to change. Before this time, nothing changed. For hundreds of years, your family lived in the same village. Your family lived in the same house, the same hut. The same lord or his descendants owned everything. You kept the same job as your family. Everything, your clothes remained the same. The food that you ate remained the same. The tools that you used remained the same. People got used to being safe and the same. And the trick there is safe. They felt safe. Alvin Toffler in 1970 came up with the book Future Shock. All of a sudden, after World War II, and even during World War II, horses were replaced by cars. Radios started to be common. People could hear the voice of another person over thousands of miles. Even TV began to be something that you could see a moving picture and hear things. Change began to happen. Automobiles made it easy to live on the outside of town and drive into town. Manufactured housing, instead of building a house one board at a time, Sears would sell you a house in a railroad car, all the pieces, all you had to do was assemble them. You didn't have to be a craftsman to build a house anymore. So the future began to change quickly, and people began to have a hard time adjusting to it. All of a sudden, change became part of their day, That is where we came into future shock. Now what we've come to is an even faster future shock, or what Amir calls an anti-future shock. Everything has changed. People, and during this earlier time, people came to believe in the future. That's the idea of abundance, prosperity, and democracy. Democracy flourished around the civilized world because we had abundance. The Industrial Revolution took advantage of people, but it created things much cheaper than by hand labor. Industrial creation created the Model T Ford. So average person on an average salary, actually the people working in Henry Ford's factories could afford to buy the Model T. And that's the way he set the price. The same thing happened with washing machines. The same thing happened with bread, happened with food. It happened with refrigerators. Everything began to change, and life became better, and everybody expected, my life is better in the lifetime I can see. We went from a time when I rode a horse and used a horse to plow, to when I got an 8N, to when I got a John Deere A, to when I got a John Deere G. The tractors got bigger and more efficient, and horses dwindled away for some people. The future became something that people became to believe in. They began to depend on the change, that everything would be better. There was abundance. Everything was produced over and over and over till there was plenty to go around. That created a confidence in the future. That made people safe. That made people opening and welcoming. There was some talk against immigrants at the beginning during World War II and right after World War II. But as abundance and prosperity came, people didn't complain about immigrants anymore. They came from Italy, they came from Poland, they came from Hungary, they came from Russia. They set up their little towns, their little areas, and they prospered, and they became part of the democratic process. They learned to speak English. Pretty soon they were indistinguishable from regular Americans. They didn't even speak their native language that much anymore. They became what we call the American melting pot. All that is now in jeopardy because that's what created democracy, the sense, and that's what he's saying, the sense of abundance, the sense of security, the sense that the future is going to be better. That is what supports, that's the foundation. That is the pillar of democracy. Now we are seeing democracy under threat. This is the reason he says democracy is under threat, because all of a sudden there is no more abundance. There is no more security. The future is no longer assured. We now see our children's future looking worse than our future. Everything in the world is becoming shorter because of global warming, because of supply things. I went to the store last week. How much is eggs now? $3.50 a dozen for eggs. Do you remember 2 years ago or 3 years ago at Aldi, you could get a dozen eggs for 50 cents? And I felt sorry for the eggs farmers because there was a total oversupply of eggs and they were giving them away at 50 cents. But we ate a lot of eggs. We don't eat as many eggs anymore. I still really love eggs, so I'm going to keep buying eggs. And I will keep buying the cage-free eggs that are almost $5 for a dozen. I don't do that very often. And I'm still looking for there used to be a lady that sold me free-range eggs for $2.50 a dozen. And she quit doing that, so I'm still looking for another lady. In fact, I predict that we will have chickens by next year. We'll have our own eggs. We got a horse, they might as well scratch around in the horse poop and get their meals that way. Okay. So the abundance that we used to count on is no longer there. The cheap televisions, then you can't buy them. Remember a year ago, there were no freezers. You couldn't buy a freezer. The supply chain problems. China is having problems with COVID. All their workers have rebelled, and that's an interesting story. A communist-controlled country who did the thing that everybody said is necessary. They made people wear masks. They isolated people. If you tried to go out and walk around without a mask, they actually dragged you in and put you in jail. They didn't let you walk around without a mask. But people finally rebelled against that and wanted to be free, so the Chinese finally said, okay, we're not going to do that anymore. The infection rate in China is just going unbelievably. They have given up what is the medically correct thing to do for the politically correct thing to do, which is kind of a mystery that they have changed course like that. But they had supply problems in China because of the workers being kind of hemmed in and not allowed to get to their place of work. Now they have supply problems in China because the people are sick and can't work. If you realize it, and I'm sure you do, everything we have comes from China. All the electronics, everything that's built, the freezers, the electric stuff, the TVs, everything comes from China. Your cell phones, everything is short in supply. And when that's short in supply, then everything down the line is short in supply. You can't buy a new car in many places because the computer chips that power the new cars, the cars are built sitting on the lot waiting, but they don't have computer chips because there's a shortage of computer chips. There's shortages everywhere, and that's what you'll hear when you order a piece of furniture and they say it'll be 6 months or a year before you get your furniture shipped in. These problems are multiplying right and left, and that is creating a strain on democracy. That is why people are mad. They say they want to go back, and I'm beginning to understand this. They want to go back to the peasant time before. I don't care if I have to pay taxes. I don't care if I can't do this, I can't do that. I want things to be level, understandable. I don't want to have to think about anything. I don't want any immigrants here. I don't want anybody taking my job. None of this is rational. They won't do the jobs that the immigrants do. It's a knee-jerk. I'm mad. I want somebody to pay for it. Hence, we get this. So let me stop there. I've got a whole bunch more, but that will be coming after all of our other stuff comes in. If you have any questions, or if you want to hear about something else, for the next 2 Sundays, we will have a more uplifting presentation. I promise. Comments?
Aside from the economic constraints and supply chain disruptions and that sort of thing, it leads to unpredictability, and Americans and most other people, but particularly Americans, like to be secure. And their sense of security comes from our being democratically spoiled, if you will. And I think that's interesting. But another force, if you will, that in a common vernacular needs to be addressed is mistrust of the government. Who would have thought that an unprecedented pandemic, mask wearing, vaccines, vaccine production, and what have you, would be political? And yet, I still believe that even though that, particularly in the case of mask wearing and vaccines and other measures that became political, I can't help but think that that was partly fueled by this base mistrust by many individuals in our country. And despite the stability that we've seen in recent years, at least from the White House, I think, and also the encouraging signs may be that Congress will begin to do something called compromise. There's still that mistrust of government that I think is one of our greatest challenges that we have right now.
It harks back to what we talked about before, not only mistrust of government, mistrust of science. We don't believe in global warming. The incoming Congress wants to investigate and prosecute Dr. Fauci. For what? For trying to help people.
That's the mistrust.
That's the mistrust.
Overcoming reasonable science.
And this anger, this hatred of anything new, anything more intelligent than I am, anything that I can't understand, anything that goes against those little beliefs that people put in my head, not beliefs that I have, that I've created, beliefs that Democrats drink children's blood, that drives people to go to a pizza parlor and start shooting off a gun. People do this. Some people are susceptible to this, and the people who instigate it. January 6th, the people who stormed the Capitol. There is talk of the new Congress pardoning every one of those people. And there were 60-some police officers injured, and 4 of them died. 1 by those people, and 3 by suicide. But the suicides were brought on by what they suffered there, and the reaction of the people whose lives they saved. Can you imagine fighting that crowd, having your head squashed in a door, and then having the congressperson who you escorted out of the Congress say they were all just tourists? They were all just there and, looking and seeing what was going on. There was no violence. There was no problem. And you helped that congressperson escape with his life, and he turned on you. And if you remember the the officer who was killed, they gave them the presidential citation, and they were met by the leaders of Congress. They refused to shake hands. They refused to even look McCarthy and Mitchell in the eye because of the things that McCarthy and Mitchell had said about their husband, their father, their son. It's unconscionable. And in the old days, in the days of reputable politicians, they would have been shamed out of the building. And now they just proceed with this, and they pay their money for this. So, anything else? Okay, it's a topic for discussion. It's something I want you to think about, I want you to be aware of. We've talked about before, we need to start a letter writing campaign to the local paper to get some information out. People, at least they read it, they may not believe it, and they may laugh at it, but at least if the information is there, they know that the information is there. Okay, our offering is a white Christmas is our music. Feel free to put something in, feel free to take something out. Closing hymn is 247, O Little Town of Bethlehem. then the dear babe rests within. If only Christians would act all the time like Christians. All right. You might remember, I hope you remember, Marcia and Richard Venus were here last Sunday. A remarkable person and ever more remarkable. He has written a book which I ordered on Amazon and received this week. I just started to look at it, and I think rather than what I had printed for the extinguishing of the chalice, I'm going to read you his preface. This is very short, his introduction. To give you an idea, Richard was a journalist before he became a pastor, and he did not lose his talent as a journalist. I am a runner. I run in the morning with my dog. Come sun, rain, snow, sleet, or hail, I run. Sometimes I run in 3 or 4 of those conditions in 1 3 to 5 mile stretch. Skeptics say it must be boring. It's not. I come to hills and wonder how I got there. Does that remind you of Richard? My mind has been elsewhere. I write letters to friends, make speeches I'd like to give, cure my enemies, curse my enemies, wonder about the budget crisis, the war in Afghanistan, my granddaughter's homework, and then I wave to passers-by. No 2 days are the same. There are deer who look at me as intently as I stare at them. There are weeds to watch as they change color and shape with the seasons, and puddles to splash in. I saw a great blue heron one misty morning rise up from her nest on the muddy Miami River. Without my glasses, or sometimes with them in the rain, objects take on strange shapes. One holiday I said hello to an evergreened mailbox by the edge of a graveled driveway, mistaking it for a 3rd grader waiting for her school bus. I wonder and reflect and question as I travel these hills and dales. The essays are, in part, a result of those traveling ruminations. I wonder about the things as I pass on those early morning runs. At the end of one lonely stretch along the edge of a cornfield stands a gray-blue farmhouse with parts that go in and out, this way and that, suggesting it has had several reincarnations as the needs of the inhabitants have changed. One morning very early, as the sun was peeking up the gray sky behind the barn, I trotted by the front yard. I turned my head to see a woman draped in what I guessed to be a frayed light blue terry cloth bathrobe. Her arms were folded across her chest. She was standing in the broad, dusty window, staring out over the road to the empty weed-filled field in the distance. I wondered if she was the Diane whose name appeared with bills on the mailbox I passed as I continued up the road, and I am not sure our eyes ever met. It didn't seem like she was connecting with anything outside herself in that moment. I wondered about her for a few yards. Then my dog was chased by a local Cocker Spaniel, and my brain moved on to something else. I still run down Bill and Diane's desolate road. I call it their road because theirs is the only name I find on that stretch. But changes have occurred, and I wonder what they mean. Surrounded by no trespassing, travel at your own risk, and trotters' riding stable signs, was the mailbox bearing their names. One day, only Bill's name remained. Diane was smudged out with some off-white paint, probably left over from the living room ceiling. Months have gone by, and the sign has changed again. Bill's name is gone now. None has replaced it. Dogs still charge forth from the backyard to bark at my running mate. Sometimes someone must occupy that place, although I never see them. I think of the woman in the window as I trudge by and wonder if her thoughts that morning were about a fight she had with Bill earlier, or about a lover she could not tell him about, or him, her, or just the day that lay ahead. I wonder what happened as I run by a place where 2 names have disappeared from view. I wonder if those 2 are sad about leaving the gray-blue farm. I wonder about people when I run. I wonder what makes them come together and go apart. I wonder about life and what makes sense and doesn't. The essays in this book are some of the conclusions and questions that accompany me as I wonder and wander, trudging slowly ahead. And bless this reading from Richard. All right, we'll hear more from that as we go along. All right. Our postlude is Silent Night, and before we start, let me show you something that I found on Silent Night. Can you read this? This is Mary and Joseph arriving in Bethlehem. Don't be mad. I said I was sorry. I should have made reservations. Talk to me, Mary. Mary? Mary? And Mary says, I'm fine. That is the beginnings of Silent Night.
Yeah. This is 251 if you want to sing.
There are donuts. There's still cider left from last week, and I think somebody has brought in cookies. I just got a text from Tara. Their Christmas Eve service is at 7:30. 7:30 to 8:30 is the service, 8:30 to 9:30 to get back here, so I will be here at 10 o'clock. If there's a change, I'll let you know. 10 o'clock, Christmas Eve. You're more than welcome to come. There might even be some cookies left and some cider left. And if we don't have any musicians, we'll have canned music, Christmas tunes, and we'll show the church here with some light, and maybe I'll find some Christmas things to present. So have a good week. Don't forget the Christmas horses. Even though we've all gone to cars and trucks and electric vehicles, some of us still hang on to the Christmas.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
I want to see your tie. Oh, that's quite a tie.
Mistletoe.
Yes. Christmas tie every week. And the one with the music in it, the Christmas trees that plays Jingle Bells, I'll wear that on Christmas. Yes.